Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. In just the past few days, America has bid farewell to some truly extraordinary individuals, legends whose influence has shaped our culture, inspired countless lives, and will continue to echo through generations. Today, we pay tribute to their remarkable journeys, celebrate their timeless achievements, and reflect on the legacies they've left behind. If their stories have ever touched your heart, I invite you to honor them by liking this video, a small gesture to help keep their memory alive. Now, let's begin this heartfelt remembrance. Randy Boone, the singer-actor best remembered as Randy Benton on NBC's The Virginian, passed away on August 28, 2025, at the age of 83. From 1964 to 1966, Boone appeared in 46 episodes, bringing warmth and music to a show built on grit. His guitar-strumming cowboy became a fan favorite, with on-screen folk songs delivered with the authenticity of a real-life troubadour. His horse Clyde, often featured alongside him, became as familiar to audiences as Boone himself. Before The Virginian, Boone played Vern Hodges in It's a Man's World, 1962-63, a short-lived series that showcased his natural charm. His television career grew quickly, with appearances in The Twilight Zone, Bonanza, Gunsmoke, and The Alfred Hitchcock Hour. In 1965, he released a solo record, Ramblin' Randy, and a duet album with co-star Roberta Shore. His versatility as actor, singer, and songwriter made him stand out in a crowded television landscape. Born January 17, 1942, in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Boone studied mathematics before hitchhiking across the U.S., playing guitar in coffee houses until Hollywood came calling. That restless spirit shaped his cowboy image. He wasn't just acting the part, he had lived it. By the late 1980s, Boone stepped away from acting, turning to construction and private life. Yet fans never forgot the young cowboy whose songs filled their living rooms. His legacy rests not only in Western reruns, but in the memory of an artist who brought sincerity and song to a genre often known only for gunfights and grit. Randy Boone, beloved for his role as Randy Benton on The Virginian, died on August 28, 2025, at age 83. His guitar-strumming cowboy added warmth to the show's grit, and his horse Clyde became a fan favorite. Before that, Boone appeared in It's a Man's World, Bonanza, Gunsmoke, and more. He released Ramblin' Randy in 1965 and recorded duets with Roberta Shore. Born in North Carolina, he hitchhiked across the U.S. before landing in Hollywood. He left acting in the 80s but remained cherished for bringing sincerity and song to classic westerns. Giorgio Armani, the legendary Italian designer whose minimalist elegance reshaped global fashion, passed away on September 4, 2025, at the age of 91. Launching his fashion house in 1975, Armani revolutionized menswear with soft, shouldered suits that stripped away rigidity. His designs became iconic in American Gigolo, 1980, defining the power of understated style. From a small Milan workshop, his empire grew into a Euros 2.3 billion business by 2024, spanning haute couture, ready-to-wear, Emporio Armani, and accessible lines like Armani Exchange. Admirers praised how his aesthetic scaled from red carpets to streetwear without losing its signature restraint. Born July 11, 1934 in Piacenza, Italy, Armani initially studied medicine before switching to design. He worked as a window dresser and assistant before building a fashion empire with over 2,500 retail stores, home furnishings, fragrances, and Armani-branded hotels. Off the runway, Armani pushed industry standards, going fur-free in 2016 and repurposing factories during the 2020 pandemic to produce medical gowns. His influence extended into philanthropy, architecture, and sustainability. He redefined elegance from Milan's runways to global culture. Giorgio Armani, fashion icon and founder of the Armani brand, died on September 4, 2025 at age 91. He revolutionized menswear with soft-shouldered suits and built a Euros 2.3 billion empire spanning couture, streetwear, and lifestyle. Born in Italy, he studied medicine before turning to design. His work became iconic in American Gigolo, and his brand expanded to over 2,500 stores. He went fur-free in 2016 and supported healthcare during the pandemic. Armani's legacy is one of elegance, innovation, and global impact. Rolling Ray, the viral social media star known for his outspoken personality and unfiltered humor, passed away on September 4, 2025, at the age of 28. Rising to fame in the mid-2010s through viral clips on Twitter and Instagram, Ray became a cultural force. His sharp one-liners, dramatic delivery, and signature phrase "purr" became part of internet vernacular. A fan-favorite moment came during his appearance on Catfish, Trolls in 2018, where his charisma and fiery wit made the episode unforgettable. His fame extended to influencer collaborations, talk show guest spots, and a loyal following that admired his ability to turn personal struggles into humor and resilience. Living with a disability, Ray never hid his challenges. He embraced them, showing millions that confidence and self-expression could thrive in adversity. Born September 5, 1996, in Washington, D.C., he credited his family and faith for grounding him amid sudden fame. Rolling Ray wasn't just a viral sensation. He was a reminder that authenticity resonates louder than perfection. Rolling Ray, viral social media star, died on September 4, 2025, at age 28. Known for his sharp humor and signature purr, he rose to fame through viral clips and a standout appearance on Catfish, Trolls. Living with a disability, Ray embraced his challenges and inspired millions with his confidence. Born in Washington, D.C., he credited family and faith for his strength. Ray's legacy is one of authenticity, resilience, and joy. Greene, the pioneering Canadian Oneida actor who brought Indigenous stories to the forefront of film and television, passed away on September 1, 2025, at the age of 73. Greene first captured global attention as Kicking Bird in Dances with Wolves, 1990. Earning an Oscar nomination and helping the film win 7 Academy Awards. Over a 40-year career, Greene appeared in over 100 films and TV episodes, including The Green Mile, 1999, Maverick, 1994, and The Last of Us, 2023. Each role carried authenticity and weight, giving Indigenous characters dignity and depth. Born June 22, 1952, in Oswego, Ontario, Greene began as a welder and audio technician before pursuing acting. His rise from community theater to Hollywood was a story of perseverance. He received Gemini and Canadian Screen Awards and was appointed to the Order of Canada in 2015. In 2025, he received the Governor General's Performing Arts Award. Greene's legacy lives on in performances that gave voice to culture, history, and humanity. Greene, acclaimed Canadian Oneida actor, died on September 1, 2025, at age 73. He earned an Oscar nomination for Dances with Wolves and appeared in over 100 films and shows, including The Green Mile and The Last of Us. Born in Ontario, Greene rose from community theater to Hollywood, earning national honors and inspiring generations. His roles gave Indigenous characters dignity and permanence. Greene's legacy is one of craft, culture, and courage. Mark Knoller, the legendary CBS News White House correspondent known for his meticulous presidential coverage, passed away on August 30, 2025, at the age of 73. From the 1980s through 2020, Knoller became a trusted voice in Washington, reporting across 5 administrations, from Ford to Trump, with precision and dedication. Fans and colleagues admired his ability to turn press briefings into textured stories, backed by statistics only he seemed to know. Born February 20, 1952, in Brooklyn, Knoller graduated from NYU and began at AP Radio in 1975 before joining CBS News in 1988. Affectionately known as the unofficial presidential archivist, he shared his records generously with reporters, historians, and White House aides. Even after his layoff in 2020, he continued offering insight, proving that devotion to craft outlasts any title. Knoller's legacy lives on in every question about presidential trivia, because somewhere in his notes he had the answer. Mark Knoller, longtime CBS White House correspondent, died on August 30, 2025 at age 73. He covered 5 presidents with unmatched precision and became known as the unofficial presidential archivist. Born in Brooklyn, he joined CBS in 1988 and continued sharing insights even after leaving the network. His dedication and generosity made him a trusted voice in journalism. Danielle Spencer, beloved for her role as Dee Thomas on What's Happening, passed away on August 11, 2025, at the age of 59. With her razor-sharp wit and perfectly timed sarcasm, Spencer became one of the most recognizable child stars of the late 1970s. Her portrayal of Dee, equal parts sass and charm, made her a sitcom icon. Born June 24, 1965 in Trenton, New Jersey, Spencer began acting at age 11 when she was cast in What's Happening, which aired from 1976 to 1979. She reprised her role in What's Happening Now, from 1985 to 1988, appearing in nearly 140 episodes across both series. After stepping away from acting, Spencer pursued veterinary medicine, earning her degree from Tuskegee University and building a successful practice in California. Fans admired her ability to transition from Hollywood to healing, while still making occasional appearances at fan events. Her personal journey was marked by resilience. At age 12, she survived a car accident that left her with lasting injuries. Decades later, she battled breast cancer and spoke openly about her treatment, earning praise for her honesty and strength. Danielle Spencer leaves behind 2 legacies, one on screen, where Dee Thomas remains etched in sitcom history, and one in service, where her work as a veterinarian touched countless lives. She will be remembered not just for making audiences laugh, but for building a meaningful life beyond the spotlight. Danielle Spencer, star of What's Happening, died on August 11, 2025 at age 59. Her role as Dee Thomas made her a sitcom icon, known for her sharp wit and charm. After acting, she became a veterinarian, earning her degree from Tuskegee and building a successful practice. She survived a serious car accident at 12 and later battled breast cancer, sharing her journey with courage. Spencer leaves behind a legacy of laughter and compassion, on screen and in service. Bobby Whitlock, founding member of Derek and the Dominoes, passed away on August 10, 2025 at the age of 77. With soulful vocals, gospel-infused keyboard work, and raw songwriting, Whitlock helped shape one of rock's most enduring albums. Born March 18, 1948 in Memphis, Tennessee, he was the first white artist signed to Stax Records. In 1969, he joined Eric Clapton, Jim Gordon, and Carl Radle to form Derek and the Dominoes. Their sole studio album, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs, 1970, became a rock cornerstone. Whitlock co-wrote Bell Bottom Blues and delivered searing vocals that paired with Clapton's in unforgettable harmony. Though the band lasted barely 2 years, its music endured. Whitlock released solo albums like Raw Velvet and later performed with his wife, Coco Carmel, in intimate settings that showcased his devotion to heartfelt music. He never chased mainstream fame, but his influence ran deep. Bobby Whitlock was the soul behind Layla, a voice that carried gospel passion into rock and roll. His songs remain timeless. Bobby Whitlock, co-founder of Derek and the Dominoes, died on August 10, 2025 at age 77. He co-wrote Bell Bottom Blues and helped shape Layla, one of rock's greatest albums. Born in Memphis, he blended gospel, soul, and rock, later releasing solo albums and performing with his wife. Though not a household name, his influence runs deep. Whitlock's voice was the soul at the heart of Layla, raw, passionate, unforgettable. Jane Morgan, the elegant pop singer who bridged American and European audiences in the 1950s and 60s, passed away on August 4, 2025, at the age of 100. Born May 3, 1924, in Newton, Massachusetts, Morgan trained at Juilliard before launching a career in French nightclubs. Her breakthrough came with Capitol Records in 1956. The following year, she released Fascination, which sold over 1 million copies and became her signature song. Hits like The Day the Rains Came and With Open Arms followed, charting in both the US and UK. Morgan recorded more than a dozen albums, including Jane Morgan Sings, 1957, and What Now My Love, 1966, and appeared on major television shows like The Ed Sullivan Show. Even as rock and roll reshaped pop culture, she remained active in vaudeville, Broadway, and European venues. Her voice, clear, warm, and elegant, defined mid-century pop. Jane Morgan's passing marks the loss of one of the last enduring voices of the pre-rock era. Jane Morgan, pop singer of the 1950s and 60s, died on August 4, 2025 at age 100. Her hit, Fascination, sold over 1 million copies, and she charted internationally with songs like The Day the Rains Came. Trained at Juilliard, she performed across Europe and the US, appearing on The Ed Sullivan Show and recording more than a dozen albums. Morgan's voice embodied elegance and remains a standard of mid-century pop. Jeannie Seely, Grammy-winning country singer, songwriter, producer, and author, passed away at age 79. Born July 6, 1945 in Titusville, Florida, Seely rose to fame in 1966 with Don't Touch Me, which reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot Country chart. She released over 20 studio albums and became one of the first female producers in country music, founding Seely Records in the 70s. Her songs were recorded by legends like Dolly Parton and Connie Smith. Her memoir, Honey, I Dare You, 2003, chronicled her journey through a male-dominated industry. Inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2020, Seely remained active, mentoring artists, hosting radio shows, and leading songwriting workshops. Her voice, spirit, and advocacy shaped generations. Jeannie Seely, country music trailblazer, died at age 79. Her Grammy-winning hit, Don't Touch Me, launched a career spanning 6 decades. She released over 20 albums, founded her own label, and mentored countless artists. Inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2020, she remained active in music and advocacy. Seely's legacy is one of courage, creativity, and enduring voice. Flaco Jimenez, Grammy-winning accordionist and cultural ambassador of Tex-Mex music, passed away on July 31, 2025, at the age of 86. Born March 11, 1939 in San Antonio, Texas, Jimenez followed in the footsteps of his father, Santiago Jimenez Sr., a pioneer of conjunto music. By the 1950s, Flaco was recording local hits and performing in dance halls. Over his career, he appeared on more than 70 albums, blending conjunto with country, rock, and blues. He collaborated with Dwight Yoakam, Ry Cooder, Emmylou Harris, and the Rolling Stones. In the 1990s, he co-founded the Texas Tornadoes, earning a Grammy for Best Mexican-American Album. He won 5 Grammys in total and received a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2015. His fast, fluid, and joyful playing transformed the accordion into a global symbol of Tex-Mex music. Flaco Jimenez's legacy lives on in recordings that continue to inspire. Flaco Jimenez, legendary accordionist, died on July 31, 2025 at age 86. He blended conjunto with country, rock, and blues, appearing on over 70 albums and collaborating with major artists. Co-founder of the Texas Tornadoes, he won 5 Grammys and a Lifetime Achievement Award. His playing made the accordion a global symbol of Tex-Mex music. Jimenez's sound lives on, fast, fluid, and unforgettable. By the late 1990s, Michael Douglas had become a paradox in motion, a man whose face was synonymous with power, seduction, and danger, yet whose soul was quietly unraveling beneath the weight of expectation. The characters he portrayed, Gordon Gekko, Dan Gallagher, Nicholas Van Orton, were not just roles. They were reflections of a culture obsessed with control, wealth, and the illusion of invincibility. And somewhere along the way, the man behind the mask began to blur with the mask itself. He was no longer just the son of Kirk Douglas. He was the embodiment of a new kind of masculinity, one that seduced, manipulated, and self-destructed in equal measure, but the applause came with a cost. Fame, he once said, is like a drug that numbs you to your own truth. And as the 2000s approached, that truth began to surface in ways he could no longer ignore. Behind the scenes, his marriage to Deandra Luker, His first wife and the mother of his son, Cameron, was crumbling. The tabloids feasted on the drama, painting him as the aging playboy, the emotionally distant father, the man who had everything and yet seemed to lose more with each passing year. Cameron, struggling with addiction and legal troubles, became a painful mirror for Michael, a reflection of the very wounds he had tried to bury. "I didn't know how to be the father I never had," he confessed in a rare moment of vulnerability. The guilt was suffocating. The headlines were merciless. And the silence between father and son grew louder than any red carpet applause. Then came the diagnosis. In 2010, Michael Douglas revealed he was battling stage 4 throat cancer. The news stunned the world. The man who had played titans of industry and masters of manipulation was now fighting for his life. His voice, his instrument, his identity was under siege. The treatments were brutal: radiation, chemotherapy. Weeks of pain, nausea, and uncertainty. He lost weight, he lost strength, but he never lost resolve. "I had to learn how to speak again," he said, "how to eat, how to breathe without fear." And in that crucible of suffering, something shifted. The man who had once been defined by roles and reputation began to rediscover himself, not as a star, but as a survivor. His marriage to Catherine Zeta-Jones, forged in the fire of fame and scrutiny, became a sanctuary. She stood by him through the darkest nights, through the hospital visits and the whispered prayers. Their love, often dismissed as a Hollywood pairing, proved itself in the trenches of illness and recovery. Together they weathered storms that would have shattered lesser bonds. And Cameron, his son, his sorrow, began to heal. After years of incarceration and addiction, he emerged with clarity and purpose. Their relationship, once fractured, began to mend, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. "We're learning each other," Michael said, "not as father and son, but as two men trying to forgive." In the years that followed, Michael Douglas didn't just return to acting, he reinvented it. His role in Behind the Candelabra as Liberace was a revelation, campy, tragic, and tender. In the Kaminsky Method, he played an aging acting coach grappling with mortality, friendship, and the absurdity of aging. It was his most personal work yet, a performance that felt less like acting and more like confession. And then, in a twist no one saw coming, he joined the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Hank Pym in Ant-Man. The man who once embodied Wall Street's ruthlessness was now mentoring superheroes. It was surreal, it was ironic, and it was perfect, because Michael Douglas had become something more than a leading man. He had become a symbol of endurance. He had survived the shadow of a legendary father. He had survived the distortion of fame. He had survived cancer, heartbreak, and the slow erosion of youth. And through it all, he had never stopped working, never stopped evolving, never stopped trying to understand the man behind the myth. Today, when he walks onto a set or speaks at an event, there is a reverence in the room, not just for the actor, but for the journey. For the boy who once felt invisible in the back of a limousine. For the producer who dared to make One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest when no one believed in him. For the father who learned to love through loss. For the survivor who found his voice again. Michael Douglas is not just a cinematic icon. He is a living testament to the power of reinvention, to the idea that legacy is not inherited, it is earned. That greatness is not measured by box office numbers or golden statues, but by the scars we carry and the stories we choose to tell. And as long as he continues to speak, to act, to live with the quiet dignity of a man who has seen both heaven and hell, his legacy will remain not just in film reels and headlines, but in the hearts of those who see in him a reflection of their own battles, their own resilience, their own unfinished stories. As the 2010s unfolded, Michael Douglas stood at a crossroads, not of career but of character. The man who had once been defined by ambition, controversy, and cinematic bravado was now entering a season of reckoning. The spotlight had dimmed, but the clarity had sharpened. He was no longer chasing roles. He was choosing them, not for acclaim, but for meaning. His performance in the Kaminsky Method was more than a role. It was a mirror. Playing Sandy Kaminsky, an aging acting coach navigating mortality, friendship, and the absurdities of growing old, Michael delivered a masterclass in vulnerability. The show didn't just entertain, it revealed. It peeled back the layers of bravado and showed a man grappling with the same questions we all face. What remains when the applause fades? Who are we when the lights go out? I've spent my whole life trying to prove something, he said in a 2021 interview. Now I just want to understand it. That shift, from proving to understanding, marked a profound evolution. He began speaking more openly about aging, about regret, about the quiet joys of family dinners and long walks. The man who once embodied Wall Street's ruthless edge now found peace in simplicity. His marriage to Catherine Zeta-Jones, once scrutinized for its age gap and celebrity sheen, had matured into a partnership rooted in resilience. They weathered mental health struggles, public speculation, and the relentless churn of fame. But through it all, they remained tethered, not by glamour but by grace. We've learned to listen, he said, to forgive, to grow together, not just beside each other. His relationship with Cameron, too, had transformed. After years of estrangement, addiction, and incarceration, father and son began rebuilding slowly, deliberately. They spoke not as icons and heirs, but as wounded men seeking healing. Cameron, now sober and a father himself, credited Michael's honesty and humility as the foundation for their reconciliation. He stopped being a symbol, Cameron said, and started being my dad. In his later years, Michael Douglas also embraced mentorship. He began working with young filmmakers, offering guidance not as a gatekeeper but as a fellow traveler. He spoke at universities, participated in panels, and used his platform to champion stories that mattered, stories about justice, resilience, and the human spirit. He didn't need the spotlight anymore. He had become the light. Philanthropy became another pillar of his legacy. He supported cancer research, mental health initiatives, and arts education. He funded scholarships, donated to hospitals, and quietly visited patients undergoing treatment. I know what it's like to feel fragile, he said, to wonder if you'll ever feel whole again. If I can help someone feel less alone, that's worth more than any award. And yet, the awards kept coming. Lifetime achievement honors, humanitarian accolades, retrospectives celebrating his 5-decade career, but Michael Douglas received them not with triumph, but with tenderness. I'm grateful, he said, but I'm more grateful for the moments that didn't make headlines. The quiet ones, the ones that taught me who I really am. He began writing journals, reflections, letters to his children, not for publication, but for preservation. He wanted them to know the man behind the myth, the boy who felt invisible, the producer who dared to dream, the actor who lost himself in roles, the father who found redemption, the husband who learned to love, the survivor who chose to live. And in those pages, he wrote something that perhaps defines him best. Legacy isn't what you leave behind, it's what you carry forward. It's the love you give, the truth you tell, the courage you show when no one's watching. Today, Michael Douglas is not just a name in film history. He is a living archive of resilience. A man who walked through fire and emerged not unscathed but illuminated. His story is not a straight line, it is a spiral, winding through fame, failure, forgiveness, and finally, freedom. When he steps onto a stage now, there is no performance. There is presence. When he speaks, there is no script. There is soul, and when he looks back, he does not see a perfect life. He sees a life that mattered. Because in the end, Michael Douglas didn't just survive Hollywood, he transcended it. He turned legacy into liberation, and as long as his voice finds breath, his story will remain not just a chapter in cinema, but a testament to the human spirit. By the time he entered his 8th decade, Michael Douglas had become something rare in Hollywood, a man who had outlived his myth, not just survived it, but reshaped it. He was no longer the son of a legend, the face of a genre, or the symbol of a cinematic archetype. He was something quieter, deeper, and more enduring. He was a witness to the golden age of cinema, where his father, Kirk Douglas, carved his name into the marble of Hollywood history with grit and gravitas. A witness to the rise of New Hollywood, where he himself helped redefine masculinity on screen, not with perfection, but with complexity. And a witness to the digital age, where storytelling became global, fragmented, and fast, and where he chose to slow down, to speak with intention, and to act with purpose. He began to see legacy not as a monument, but as a conversation. In interviews, he spoke less about his own achievements and more about the lessons he hoped to pass on. "I've made mistakes," he said. "I've hurt people. I've lost things I thought I'd never lose, but I've also learned that the only legacy worth leaving is one that helps someone else stand taller." He mentored young actors, not with lectures, but with listening. He sat in quiet corners of sets, offering advice only when asked, sharing stories not to impress, but to illuminate. He reminded them that fame is fleeting, but craft is eternal, that the applause fades, but the discipline remains, that the most important role they'll ever play is the one they live off-screen, and he began to speak more openly about mortality, not with fear, but with reverence. "I've seen death up close," he said. "I felt its breath on my neck, but I've also seen what survives it: love, kindness, memory. Those are the things that don't die." He visited hospitals, not as a celebrity, but as a survivor. He sat with patients, held their hands, and told them that healing is not just physical, it's emotional, spiritual, communal. He funded research, supported caregivers, and used his voice to amplify the voices of those who often go unheard. And at home, he found peace. In the quiet moments with Catherine, in the laughter of his children, in the long walks through gardens where no cameras followed. He read poetry. He wrote letters. He watched old films, not to relive the past, but to understand it. To see how far he had come, to see how much he had changed. Because Michael Douglas had changed. He had shed the armor of fame. He had let go of the need to be right, to be revered, to be remembered in a certain way. He had embraced the truth that legacy is not about control, it's about contribution. And so he contributed to art, to healing, to family, to the quiet revolution of aging with dignity in a world that worships youth. He showed that a man can be powerful without being feared, that he can be vulnerable without being weak, that he can be famous without being hollow. His final roles reflected this shift. Characters who were flawed, tender, wise, men who had lived, lost, and learned, men who didn't need to win, they needed to connect. And audiences responded. Not with frenzy, but with gratitude. They saw in him not just a performer, but a companion. Someone who had walked through fire and come out with stories that made their own lives feel less lonely. And when the curtain finally begins to fall, when the last spotlight dims and the final credits roll, Michael Douglas will not be remembered for one role, one film, or one moment. He will be remembered for the arc, for the journey, for the way he turned pain into purpose, fame into service, and legacy into love. Because in the end, he was never just an actor. He was a son who forgave, a father who tried, a husband who stayed, a survivor who spoke, and a man who, against all odds, learned how to live. And that, Porridge, is the kind of legacy that doesn't fade. It echoes. It teaches. It endures. In 2013, as Michael Douglas recovered from cancer and tried to rebuild the fragile bridge between himself and his son Cameron, another fracture began to show, one that threatened the very foundation of his second marriage. The emotional toll of illness, fame, and family crisis had begun to weigh heavily on Catherine Zeta-Jones. The woman who had stood beside him through radiation burns and sleepless nights was now facing her own battle, one that couldn't be seen on scans or measured in blood work. Catherine was diagnosed with bipolar Roman II disorder, a condition marked by deep depressive episodes and periods of hypomania. For years, she had carried the weight of public expectation with grace, but behind closed doors, the pressure was suffocating. The media, ever hungry for scandal, pounced. Headlines speculated about breakdowns, separations, and the unraveling of Hollywood's golden couple. Michael, still recovering from cancer and navigating the heartbreak of his son's incarceration, found himself in unfamiliar territory. He was no longer the one being cared for, he had to become the caretaker. And yet, he didn't flinch. "You don't walk away when someone you love is hurting," he said. "You lean in." They took time apart, not as a prelude to divorce, but as a strategy for healing. Catherine entered treatment. Michael focused on his children. The tabloids called it a split, but in truth it was a recalibration, a pause, a breath, a decision to fight for something worth saving, and they did save it. By 2014, they had reunited, not with fanfare, but with quiet determination. They began attending therapy together, relearning how to communicate, how to listen, how to hold space for each other's pain. "We had to rebuild," Michael said, "not from scratch, but from truth." Their love, once defined by glamour and headlines, became something sturdier. Something earned, They traveled less, talked more. They cooked together, read together, sat in silence together. And slowly the cracks became seams, not erased but stitched with care. Michael began speaking publicly about mental health, using his platform to destigmatize the very thing that had once threatened his marriage. Catherine, too, became an advocate, sharing her story not as a confession, but as a lifeline for others. Together, they turned their private pain into public purpose. And through it all, their children, Dylan and Carrie's, grew up watching not just actors, but adults who chose love over pride, presence over performance. "We're not perfect," Michael said, "but we're present, and that's enough." Today, their marriage stands not as a fairy tale, but as a testament to endurance, to empathy, to the kind of love that survives not because it's easy, but because it's chosen again and again in sickness and in silence, in heartbreak and in healing. Michael Douglas, once the embodiment of cinematic power, now speaks with the softness of a man who has learned that real strength is showing up when it's hardest. That love is not a script, it's a practice. And that the greatest role he's ever played is not on screen, but in the quiet moments where forgiveness meets devotion. By the mid-2010s, Michael Douglas had endured more than most men ever speak aloud. He had survived cancer, watched his son battle addiction and incarceration, weathered the unraveling of one marriage and the rebuilding of another, and stood at the center of a media storm that often mistook his silence for scandal. And yet, through it all, he remained. Not untouched, not unscarred, but undeniably present. In interviews, his tone shifted. The bravado of youth gave way to reflection. The sharp edges of his public persona softened into something more generous, more grounded. He spoke less about box office numbers and more about the value of time. "I don't count years anymore," he said. "I count moments, the ones that matter, the ones that stay." He began to embrace aging, not as a decline, but as a deepening. His roles reflected this shift. In the Kaminsky Method, he portrayed a man navigating the absurdities of growing old with humor, humility, and heart. It wasn't just acting, it was autobiography. A man once cast as the embodiment of danger now played a mentor, a friend, a father figure. And audiences leaned in, not for spectacle, but for truth. Off-screen, he became a steward of legacy. He spoke at film schools, mentored young actors, and used his platform to champion stories that honored complexity over cliché. He didn't want to be remembered for the characters he played. He wanted to be remembered for the lives he touched, and he touched many. He supported cancer research, mental health initiatives, and arts education. He funded scholarships, visited hospitals, and quietly donated to causes that reflected his own journey. He didn't seek credit. He sought connection. "If my story helps someone feel less alone," he said, "then it's worth telling." At home, he found joy in the ordinary, in cooking breakfast with Catherine, in watching his children grow into their own voices, in walking through gardens where no cameras followed. He read poetry. He wrote letters. He sat in silence and let it speak. And he began to understand something profound: that legacy is not what you leave behind. It's what you live into. It's the love you give, the truth you tell, the courage you show when no one's watching. He started writing more journals, reflections, fragments of memory, not for publication, but for preservation, for his children, for himself, for the quiet record of a life that had been both extraordinary and excruciating. In one entry, he wrote, "I used to think survival was about strength. Now I know it's about softness, about staying open when everything tells you to close." That softness became his strength. It allowed him to forgive his father, to rebuild with his son, to love his wife not as a symbol, but as a partner. It allowed him to see his own story not as a script, but as a song, imperfect, unfinished, but undeniably his. And as the years passed, he stopped chasing legacy. He started living it. He took fewer roles, but chose them with care. He spoke less, but said more. He aged not with fear, but with grace. And when he looked in the mirror, he no longer saw the man who had once been Gordon Gekko or Dan Gallagher. He saw Michael, just Michael, a man who had walked through fire and come out with stories that made the world feel less alone. Today, when he steps onto a stage or speaks at an event, there is a reverence in the room, not just for the actor, but for the journey. For the man who turned pain into purpose, fame into service, and legacy into love. Because Michael Douglas is not just a cinematic icon, He is a living archive of resilience. A man who has shown us that greatness is not about perfection, it's about persistence. That the most powerful stories are not the ones we perform, but the ones we survive. And as long as his voice finds breath, his story will remain not just a chapter in Hollywood history, but a testament to the human spirit. By 2015, Michael Douglas had become something few actors ever managed to become, not just a survivor of Hollywood, but a steward of its soul. He no longer chased roles that dazzled. He chose ones that resonated. He no longer performed to prove, he performed to connect. And in doing so, he became more than a star. He became a mirror, reflecting back to audiences the truths they often hide from themselves. He began speaking more openly about aging, not as a decline, but as a deepening. "There's a grace in growing older," he said. "You stop needing to be seen and start needing to be understood." That shift was visible in everything he did. His interviews became softer, more introspective. His public appearances carried a quiet reverence. He wasn't just admired, he was listened to, and he used that voice to uplift others. He mentored young actors, not with lectures, but with presence. He sat in quiet corners of sets, offering advice only when asked, sharing stories not to impress but to illuminate. He reminded them that fame is fleeting, but craft is eternal. That the applause fades, but the discipline remains. That the most important role they'll ever play is the one they live off-screen. He also began to reflect on legacy, not as a monument, but as a conversation. He didn't want to be remembered for the characters he played. He wanted to be remembered for the lives he touched, for the son he forgave, for the wife he stood beside, for the children he raised not perfectly but persistently, and he began to write not scripts but reflections. Letters to his children, journal entries, fragments of memory, not for publication but for preservation, for the quiet record of a life that had been both extraordinary and excruciating. In one entry he wrote, "I used to think survival was about strength. Now I know it's about softness, about staying open when everything tells you to close." That softness became his strength. It allowed him to forgive his father, to rebuild with his son, to love his wife not as a symbol but as a partner. It allowed him to see his own story not as a script, but as a song, imperfect, unfinished, but undeniably his. And as the years passed, he stopped chasing legacy. He started living it. He took fewer roles, but chose them with care. He spoke less, but said more. He aged not with fear, but with grace. And when he looked in the mirror, he no longer saw the man who had once been Gordon Gekko or Dan Gallagher. He saw Michael, just Michael, a man who had walked through fire and come out with stories that made the world feel less alone. Today, when he steps onto a stage or speaks at an event, there is a reverence in the room, not just for the actor, but for the journey. For the man who turned pain into purpose, fame into service, and legacy into love. Because Michael Douglas is not just a cinematic icon, he is a living archive of resilience. A man who has shown us that greatness is not about perfection, it's about persistence. That the most powerful stories are not the ones we perform, but the ones we survive. And as long as his voice finds breath, his story will remain not just a chapter in Hollywood history, but a testament to the human spirit. In the stillness of his later years, Michael Douglas has become something far more enduring than a star. He has become a witness, a keeper of stories, a man who no longer performs for applause but lives for meaning. The spotlight that once followed him now feels distant, almost irrelevant. What matters now is not the fame he earned, but the peace he chose. He walks slowly now, not because he must, but because he wants to. He listens more than he speaks. He reads history not to escape, but to understand. And when he speaks of his own life, it is not with grandeur, but with gratitude. "I've had more than I deserved," he says, "and I've lost more than I ever thought I could, but I'm still here, and that's enough." He spends mornings in quiet corners of his Bermuda home, sipping tea while the ocean hums in the distance. He watches the tide roll in and out, a rhythm that reminds him of everything he survived. Cancer, divorce, public scandal, private heartbreak. And through it all, he remained not untouched, but unbroken. His children visit often. Dylan, now a musician, plays songs for his father that echo the same emotional depth Michael once brought to screen. Carrie's a budding artist, shares sketches and stories. Cameron, once lost to addiction, now sits beside him at dinner, a father himself, a man reborn. Their conversations are not dramatic. They are deliberate, honest. Healing and Catherine, his partner, his anchor, walks beside him still. They don't chase headlines anymore. They chase sunsets. They cook together, laugh together, sit in silence together. Their love, once tested by illness and distance, now rests in the quiet certainty of having chosen each other again and again. "We're not perfect," he says, "but we're present, and that's enough." He no longer attends every premiere. He no longer signs every script, but he still shows up, for causes that matter, for people who need him, for the stories that deserve to be told. He supports cancer research, mental health awareness, arts education, not for legacy, but for continuity. For the belief that what we give matters more than what we keep. And when asked about his own legacy, he doesn't speak of Oscars or box office records. He speaks of forgiveness, of resilience, of the quiet victories that happen far from the cameras. "I want to be remembered," he says, "as someone who kept showing up, even when it hurt. Even when it was hard." Because that's what Michael Douglas has done. He has shown up for his family, for his craft, for his truth. He has endured not because he was invincible, but because he was willing to be vulnerable. He has taught us that greatness is not about being flawless, it's about being faithful to the people we love, to the stories we carry, to the life we choose to live. So when we speak of Michael Douglas today, we are not simply recalling a man who starred in Wall Street or Fatal Attraction. We are honoring a man who chose repair over pride, presence over performance, and grace over glory. A man who stepped back not in defeat, but in dignity. And if a film, a moment, or even just a single line of his ever touched your life, let this be your quiet thank you. Because legends aren't only remembered for what they did. They're remembered for how they endured. And Michael Douglas is enduring still, in the silence, in the sea breeze, in the legacy that grows more powerful with every step he takes away from the spotlight.